Hi guys, and welcome to one more review from Rose Techniques. This time the PHOTON, I believe that's how you say it, not phone, PHOTON. What is the PHOTON? The PHOTON is what I would call a micro earphone. It falls within that category of earphones which I just recently reviewed. And in that particular review I was talking about the HE sound waist drum, which is this one here at the bottom, as you can see here, where the Astrotec Vesna also falls into that category, where the Tanya also falls into that category, the DQSM, Hermit, and a few others. And usually these IEMs, not only do they have an extremely small form factor, bullet styled, most of them bullet styled, but as well they usually use very small drivers, 6mm, 5mm in the case of for example the Senfer, the KP616. So they use very small diameter drivers, 5, 6, 6.2, 6.8, 7mm in the case of the Tanya. They have a very small body shell, as you can see, and usually with the exception of the Vesna Pro, the Astrotec, they have a fixed cable. And the PHOTON is exactly that. It's a small little IEM from Rose Techniques, using an 8mm driver. So it's actually the one that has the bigger driver out of all of these. But having said that, if you actually compare, let's say, the size of it with the Tanya, you can see there isn't much in it. I mean, it's very close. As I was saying, so it uses an 8mm driver. Some confusion in some text, some literature I saw it being mentioned as an LCP. Others I have it mentioned, as is the case in the box. Actually, it says it's a polymer diaphragm. Well, I guess that's well, it is relevant, but it isn't. That isn't the main point. It's an 8mm driver. It's got an 18 ohm impedance, and it comes in this small little KZ style, TRN kind of style box, but it brings a case just like its bigger brother. So I would say in this realm of small IEMs, let's put it that way, where usually you get a pouch, this actually brings a nice proper carrying case. Some tips, not the best of quality, and I've actually swapped my ones out. I'm using some BGVPs. And yeah, that's basically it. As for the earphone itself, let me just quickly show you. My biggest I'm not gonna say it's a complaint, you know, because it is what it is. Look, we're talking about something which the final price still hasn't been established, but it's probably going to be around $15. So for $15, we can't really be complaining too much. But anyway, my biggest issue with it is the cable, which is, although longer than the usual 1.2 meters, it's longer. It just has a life to its own, and it gets tangled very quickly, and it's slightly microphonic. You know, it's a thickish cable, even thicker than the one from the Astrotec and the one from Tanstrom. But I don't know. I just don't understand. It's just not the most user-friendly one. In terms of fit, obviously, look, this is a bullet-styled earphone, and what dictates how well it gets fixed in your ears is how deep you can insert it with what tips you're going to use. Basically, there's nothing else there that's going to hold it in place. Having said that, in my particular case, it does ask me to do some adjustments once in a while, because even though I am actually able to put it in quite deep, it eventually starts coming out. So in terms of fit and isolation, I'm not going to give it very good marks. I'll give it probably a 5 out of 10 if I was gonna actually give it a number. But they're very light. They fit really nicely, you know, and they fit really nicely in the sense that they're not fatiguing. It's just that issue that they are always kind of wanting to come out. The actual shell has got 2 vents, if you can see the front vent hole, and it's got this huge rear vent hole as well, which again is quite unusual. You don't usually see that in these smaller IEMs. And yeah, that's basically it. I mean, there's really not too much I can say about that part of it. What we're going to know is what we want to know, I guess, is what does it sound like. Well, and for that, let me introduce you to our panel of adversaries. Let's put it that way. Before I do that, first I want to say I did most of the listening because it just didn't beg the usage of any more than this. But I used the Creative SXFI, which has got more than enough power for it. I used the M15 just because I wanted to use something more high grade and wow. And I used my trusted Q-Delix 5K, absolute beast of it all, Bluetooth deck amp. Really something else. This little toy. I've got in front of us the 3 options that I usually tell people. Titania, Astrotec, Vesna, not the detachable cable version, not the Pro version. I'm sorry, the Evo version. Let me say it correctly. And the latest HC Sound waist drum. And this one, I have it here as opposed to what used to be my previous recommendation, which is the DQSM Hermit, simply because of availability of the DQSM. This one is much easier to get. This one has got the detachable cable, so we have that. In terms of price, we're talking roughly the 4N will be $15, give or take. The Tanya is 20, the Vesna is around 20, and the waist drum around $30. So significantly the most expensive one, let's put it that way. And why are these 3 my recs? Well, if you want more of a kind of a harmony style of sound, excuse me, with nice warm mids, a good tonality, a little bit dark in the upper, in the upper registers, nice mid bass thump, scales really well, likes power and takes power really well, then the Tanya is the obvious choice for you. If you want something a little bit more neutral, and I have to say that the Astrotec really delivered in that aspect, really surprised me. Definitely the Astrotec is the option. It's a neutral, but it's a very engaging, very fun neutral. Yes, it doesn't have the same amount of bass thump as you have on the Tanya, but it's got a nice, very coherent, very balanced out sound. No sibilance. It's really a very surprising listen. And the latest from HC Sound, the waist drum. Like I said, if you are looking for the more brightish, more detailed kind of reproduction that the QSM got us used to, then this is the option to go for. So warmish, neutralish, brightish. These are the options that I usually recommend people depending on what they're looking for. And the fine, and I'm just gonna quickly show you a graph which I think will be very self-explanatory once you see it. Okay, apologies. That's it. This is the graph of the 4N versus the waist drum. Waist drum in green, the 4N in blue. And I think just by looking at this, I will have explained myself almost 100%. And what I am trying to say by that is simple. It has a nice detailed upper end, upper mids, presence area. It's nice and detailed. It rolls off relatively early, but you don't really notice that there is any lack of air, let's put it that way. Sorry. It's got two peaks just like the waist drum has, one at around 3K and then one at around 6.5K, which are not really in a frequency where usually it causes problems. Usually it's the more 4.5 to 5.5 area that causes problems for some of us. That area actually is a little bit subdued as compared to those other two peaks, so there's no real sibilance. Yes, there are instances obviously when you start pushing the volume and you know that you do notice that it starts wanting to become sibilant. I mean, it scales decently for what it is, but it does lose its composure as you start giving it more power and raising the volume. But what it does have is this very nice bass. It's very full. It's very nice. Yes, that fullness of the bass as compared to, as you can see, to the waist drum will perhaps I'm not gonna say cloud things, because cloud is a very very strong word, but it doesn't make things come through as clear as on the waist drum. The waist drum does have very decent technicalities. It's got decent detailed retrieval and decent enough imaging and soundstage for what it is as well. And having this extra bass in the case of the 4N, you do notice that it does kind of affect those aspects. However, having said that, it does give this fullness of the bass, does give it really nice vocals, both female and male vocals. I found came across very nicely, and it's got this very very engaging tonality. It's the best way I could perhaps describe the 4N is as a baby QT7. Okay, it's a baby QT7. The QT7, its premise, at least in my mind, in my opinion, is it was supposed to be a V-type signature that is fun, engaging, and this is exactly basically the same thing, very similar. Okay, it's more of a W, not so much of a V, but it's a lot of fun. It's very engaging. I mean, just quickly compared here to the Tanya, I'll show you. 1 second. So you can actually see what I'm trying to say. This is the Tanya in the orange compared to the 4N, and as you can see, they've got very similar kind of mid bass and a little bit more sub bass on the 4N. I mean, it's unperceived. You can't even perceive it. Very similar the way they both peak at around 3K. However, the Tanya then just starts rolling off, while you then have that extra peak there on the 4N, and basically the same kind of extension past 10. But when you do listen to it, that little extra that it's got there, although it's in a peak and so on and so forth, it does give it a very similar sound to the Tanya, a very similar tonality and timbre, instruments and so on. But that little extra that it has, it just opens up the sound just that little extra. So I would say that its sound as compared to these here is a sound which is pending more towards the Tanya kind of sound. Okay, although graphically it graphs very similar above 1K to the HD sound waist drum. When you listen to it, it sounds like a warmish Tanya with more detail, with more air, with more twinklies, let's put it that way. It's a very engaging, very fun listening IEM, I have to say. I'll even go as far as saying that compared to its bigger brother, the Aura, I would say that I actually prefer this more times than what I thought I would prefer it. Let me be honest with you. The Aura is a great IEM. I think it's a fantastic IEM. It's in a slightly different category as opposed to this one. It's slightly bigger, so its adversaries, let's put it that way, will be things like the Moondrop Chu and so on. And I said in my review that I found it to be an alternative to it's got a very much a KZ kind of a signature, but it's an alternative to that. And if you want something that's fun but just is different and it's not the usual mainstream stuff, then that would be an option. But when you listen to that and you listen to this, and if some of you might recall, I mentioned that the Aura sometimes had this tendency of being a little bit peaky. Well, it does have a peak at 5K, so it was like borderline harsh. Because of the fact that this doesn't have that peak, it's actually been subdued. It makes it a more pleasing, a more satisfying listen, because the rest of the frequency, they are very, very neck on neck. In terms of bass response, yes, of course, the other one has a bigger driver. You feel there's more quantity of bass, but in terms of quality and how textured the bass is and so on and so forth, and clean, and I guess this comes down to the technology that they use in the actual drivers. I mean, that's the only explanation I can give, because if there's a common denominator between the QT9, the QT7, the Aura, and now the 4ion, is the quality of the bass. It's always a very nice, clean bass, more emphasized or less emphasized depending on the model, but it's always nice. It's not a slowish kind of bass. It's not sluggish. It's got a nice impact to it, and I'm like I said, I'm guessing it's down to the what they call the Tesla drive system that they have on the drivers that they're using. And yeah, that's basically it. I mean, there's really not much I can say technically wise. Look, it's fine, it's one of those IEMs that surprises you, because yes, in certain songs you're not expecting it to go and fetch that detail, and it goes and fetches it, but it doesn't have a wide sound stage. The imaging is hit or miss sometimes as well, but it is what it is. I mean, this is not something for critical listening. This is something for you to just shove in your ears, go to the gym, go and run, and that's it, and if it gets damaged, it gets damaged, but at least you are doing all of those things or whatever, and you're doing it with an IEM that has got some quality associated with it, plays really well, and that's very much it. I mean, there's really not much I can add with regards to the 4ion. It's easy enough to drive. You connect it up to your phone, and your phone will power it really nicely, not an issue. But of course, if you have a little dongle amp or something, it will work better. I mean, the dongles that I used are overkill completely. But hey, you know what? This is an IEM very much like the CRA was when it came out, and now its latest brothers and so on and so forth. There are IEMs that the price doesn't really translate into what they are capable of doing, and in that aspect, I think that the 4ion is an accomplished little earphone. Maybe ultimately, if I'm really going to nitpick and so on and so forth, it gets beaten by the Tanya's, especially by the Tanya's ability to scale really, really well. You will be obviously always very surprised by the neutrality of the Astrotec and how engaging it can be, because neutral doesn't mean it has to be boring. And the HE sound, look, the HE sound is detailed. If I was to be 100% sincere, like I always try and be, between the HE sound and the DQSM that it replaces, I would say the DQSM is a better IEM. It's got more detail than the HE sound is capable of giving us. But that's what it is. This is an interesting alternative, let's put it that way. And one that, at least, if the price does confirm that it is what it is going to be, it doesn't really break the bank, so why not maybe give it a go. All right, anyway guys, as usual, if you like my reviews, you already know, please like and subscribe. Any questions or anything, please ask away. I always try my absolute very best to get back to you as soon as possible. All right, anyway, you take care. Bye bye.